YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And if you've watched the introduction, you already know what we're going to be talking about. That is Spyderco. And here's the Spyderco Persistence. It's one out of the Tenacious lineup, Resilience and Tenacious and Persistence and Ambitious. Great knife, and this happens to be the first Spyderco that I have owned. I have a few others now, but this is the knife that got me to recognize just what it was that people found so appealing about Spyderco's blades. And they are very appealing. They're the functionality, the fit and finish, the feel, lots of great things about Spyderco's. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. There's a couple things that I've noticed. The first is that when you talk about knife collections, it seems that there's a disproportionately large number of people who collect just Spyderco knives. And when you even look at general collections, people will often have large numbers of Spydercos or multiple copies. Like they might have 4 paramilitaries or 6 Enduras, or every military that's ever been made and all the sprint runs. And so I wonder what it is that makes people want to collect Spydercos. What is it that makes people so in love with these knives? And I think there's a few different things, and I'd like to kind of go through some of those with you. Now, there'll be some complaints that I bring up along the way, but generally, this video I want to focus on what is it that draws people to Spyderco. And if you're looking for a knife, why would you want to consider a Spyderco over maybe some other knife manufacturers? So let's go ahead and get started. I think the obvious one and the major one that you've got to hit on first above everything else is that Spydercos have a very distinctive look. There's a distinctiveness in their design that just stands out. Let's use the Stretch as a prime example of that. If I were to show somebody this knife, they would say, maybe they think it looks a little weird. They would definitely know that it's a Spyderco. And I've said this before, but if you showed this to someone and then said, over there's a table with like 100 folding knives on it, can you go pick out all the Spydercos? Likely they could, because they're very distinctive in their look. A Spyderco just tends to look like a Spyderco. And that can be good and bad. Good in the sense that if you like that, boy, you've got tons and tons of knives to choose from. Now, on the other hand, if you don't like that particular Spyderco look, you're going to have a hard time finding something in that Spyderco lineup that you're drawn to. There are a few, and I'll be honest, I'm not totally crazy about the Spyderco look. I would say the Stretch is the one that I have that sort of has the most Spyderco-y look and feel to it. But a knife like the Para 2 is a pretty normal looking blade, and I think that's one of the reasons this has been so popular. I would say the Tenacious and that whole lineup, they're a little more standard in their look and feel, and so maybe are better sellers because of that. Anyway, the point is Spydercos have a very distinctive look, and that look comes from a particular philosophy. And the philosophy is by the word of Sal Glesser himself, that one time he was accused of making ugly knives. And his response to that is, we design knives around the edge, not around the eye. And so making a knife that's for cutting and that cuts well and that performs well in cutting tasks, that's a good design philosophy as far as I'm concerned. Some of them may look a little strange, but even the strangest looking Spydercos, if you get them in your hand, we'll stick with the Stretch because that's my most Spyderco-esque knife. You get this thing in hand and it just feels great. Once you hold on to it, you're like, I totally understand what all those curves are doing there. I totally understand what this shape is for, what it's achieving, and it's doing it very, very well. The Para 2 maybe even stands out more along those lines. You get this in your hand and you go, this feels right. It just feels great in terms of what you're wanting a folding knife to do for you. And so designing a knife around functionality first, that's good. And I think that's why a lot of people really appreciate Spydercos. And if you are one of those people who is not so sure about the way they look and you kind of put off by that, go to a store, go to a nuts and bolts location where you can actually get your hands on some knives and just get a feel for those Spyderco blades. I think you'll probably be impressed and just maybe go, yeah, I can overlook the way they look because of the way they feel. I know, overlook the way they look, whatever. You've got to give some credit where credit is due when it comes to design. And let's add one more thing. The Para 2 is so popular right now that you can't even get your hands on one. And I think that comes directly out of this idea that we're going to design a knife that does what people want their knives to do. That our primary objective is going to be one of function. And this thing just does. It just performs well. And it's no wonder that that knife is so popular. Now, there are some other knives that Spyderco has, and I almost wonder why they're not more popular. Because they perform really well, but maybe it's just people haven't tried it, people haven't used it, whatever. So distinctiveness of design is one of those things that I go, yeah, right on. You really nailed it on that decision. The next thing that I think Spyderco does right and really makes collecting them appealing to people is their special offers, their work with certain designers, and their sprint runs. Spyderco tends to do a really good job of offering blades, and let's go back to the stretch. I know I've used this one a lot. I've got others that I'll show you in a minute, but this is the stretch Inagami Super Blue. It's a sprint run. 1,200 of them are out there, and so you know, I knew I kind of was interested in a stretch, and then when I see the sprint run, I'm like, awesome, definitely going for it. And a lot of people, because of that, will own multiples of various different models that they like. You know, if they really like the Manix, they'll own the Manix, the standard Manix, and every variation of it, every sprint run that comes out, every different steel, they just like it. The Sage 1, 2, 3, similar idea. Now, I've got to say, there are some Spydercos that I'm not a particular fan of, and the Sage is one of them. It doesn't do much for me. Now, you know, if you're out there and think the Sage is the best knife ever made, more power to you. It's just not my style. But they've done a really good job with the Sage of making a knife that people who really love it want to own like every single one. And there's lots of options for them to own. How many times do you see people who have a bunch of Tenacious, a bunch of paramilitaries, a bunch of militaries? They just do a good job of offering those sprint runs that are very appealing. And I think there's a lot of people who feel this way. If you're the kind of person who wants to know that the knife you've got in your pocket is unique, is a little bit special, is suited to you in some way, and everyone else around you may not have that knife. Now, you know, there are 1,200 out there. So, yeah, there's a good chance somewhere somebody's going to come along that has the same knife as me. But I know if I've got this in my pocket, the chances are slim that in any given situation, someone else is going to have that blade. I think that's appealing. It's appealing to me, and I suspect, and seems like Spyderco knows, it's appealing to a lot of people. So the sprint runs and the work with a designer. A lot of times a Spyderco knife comes along where they've worked with a particular designer and they've made a knife and they're just going to make it. Maybe they're going to make 1,000, maybe they're going to make 4,000, whatever. But then that's it. They're going to make it for a few years. The knife designer comes out with this knife, and they're not going to be around again. And collectors love that kind of thing. That's what makes something collectible. And so I appreciate that, because I like to carry a knife that I feel like is a little bit unique. And so I've got to say that's great. They are very good at making knives that are going to drive some demand, are going to make people rush in to get the first one and make sure they get one because they're only around for a limited time. And you've got to say that's a smart move as a business standpoint, but it's also delivering to the customer some coolness, some uniqueness, to know that you're carrying something a little different in your pocket. And I think a lot of people who carry knives want that. Finally, all of this stuff that I've been talking about, unique designs, interesting designs, comfort in the hand, functionality, all of those things that are important, and even the special offers and the special designers and the sprint runs, if they were making garbage, none of that stuff would matter. People would not keep buying knives that fail. And so the last piece of this puzzle that I think has to stand out is quality. Spydercos are excellent when it comes to fit and finish, when it comes to comfort and ergonomics, when it comes to functionality. They just are. And this was my first Spyderco, and I was so impressed with the tightness of it, the cleanness of it, everything feeling like it was put together the way it should be. And just when you hold a Spyderco in your hand, you feel like you're holding quality, you're holding precision, you're holding something that there was some attention to detail, there was some pride of workmanship put into the thing that you're holding. It wasn't like, yeah, everyone's going to buy this, let's make a bunch of them, let's get a bunch of money out of it. It was, we're making quality tools that people are going to use and appreciate. And Spydercos just give you that sense. Now, if you're out there and you're the person who got the Tenacious that has blade play you can't get rid of, or you've got the paramilitary that just doesn't deploy well no matter how much you adjust the tightness on it, there's going to be a few bad apples in any kind of production run. We're as humans, we're not perfect. We can't have perfect fit and finish. We can't have perfect quality control. We can get close, and I think Spyderco does, but there's always going to be one or two. The opposite is also true. There are some knives that every video, the SOG Aegis, you're hard-pressed to find a SOG Aegis review where the reviewer doesn't say it's got blade play. And to me, that's super annoying. Now, are there one or two Aegises out there that don't have any blade play? I'm sure there are. But it seems like that's an issue with that knife. The opposite seems to be true with other blades. Kershaw Blur. I can't tell you how many people have made videos talking about them not locking up. I'm like, when I see 5, 6, 7 videos where they all complain about the same thing, I start to get concerned. On the other hand, if you watch a lot of Spyderco videos, over and over and over again, you get comments on quality. And by the way, you could say that about other knife companies as well, the Kershaws and the Benchmades, and the quality is good in a lot of companies, but it seems like people feel so strongly when it comes to Spyderco that they have to comment on it. That fit and finish and quality and attention to detail is their stock and trade. And I just love that. I want to know that when I buy a knife, I'm getting something that's been thought of, that's been well put together. And when you buy a Spyderco, you're going to get that. I want to bring in the Bird Caracara because the Bird line is Spyderco's sort of discount line. And I can't tell you how impressed I am with this blade. It's fantastic. The lockup, the centering, just everything that you care about in a knife, the strength, the durability, it's outstanding. They just didn't miss a beat on this knife. And to do that in your value lineup is really impressive. No blade play of any kind. Just you hold this knife and you go, wow, great blade. And this is the discount offering from this company. So if they're hitting those levels of quality on the discount knives, then what are they doing on the more expensive blades like the Para or the Manix, right? This is the Manix 2XL. It's not, but the idea is, boy, if they're paying attention on the small, cheap stuff, then you're going to certainly see that translate over into the more expensive stuff. And that brings me to the last point, and this sort of goes with quality because when we pay attention to quality, we're thinking of value, right? What am I getting for my dollar? And with Spyderco, I'd say you're doing pretty well, right? I don't have a lot of Benchmades in my collection because they're stinking expensive. I would love a 710. I would love a Contigo. I would love a Presidio. And there's a few other Benchmades that I really like, but I haven't bought them yet because, it's like $150 and up. Spyderco, on the other hand, is more like, now I know there are knives that are, you know, up there in the $220 price range, but they're closer in general to that $100, you know, if you go $150 and down type of range. You know, your typical Spyderco stretch is going to be, what, $90. Endura, which I'm going to use this to stand in as the Endura because the size and shape are so similar. But Spyderco Endura, you're going to be running $75. Delica, $75. Even the Para 2, which is a fantastic knife, one of the, I'm convinced, one of the better blades that Spyderco offers, and I think a lot of people would agree with me about that. You know, you're looking at $110, $115, which is great for what you're getting. Like, you're getting a very, very high quality, high-end folding knife for $115. Try to get that in a zero tolerance. Try to get that in a Benchmade. You're just not going to touch that price point very often, right? It's just not going to happen. Even the Manix 2 XL can be had for like $100, and this is a big, strong, beefy knife in S30V. Now, the all black version is going to cost you a little bit more, but you know, if I'm going to spend $100, like $115 is no big deal. And I got a good deal on this one, but the point still bears out. You know, I love the Benchmade Contigo, but that thing is like $175. And so for most knife owners, especially for most knife users, they're not probably going to want to pay that much. Now, I know there are lots of people who like to wear Rolexes and carry around expensive stuff. And for you, you know, go with the $300-400, you know, semi-custom knife. But for people who just want a good knife that's going to perform well, that they can carry all the time, hard to beat a Spyderco. And especially when you start comparing quality for price. You know, you're getting all the quality of a high-end production knife, but you're getting it right around that $100 price point, generally speaking, okay? I'm fully aware that there are some expensive Spydercos out there, that they're, you know, the titanium frame locks. And, you know, the Spyderco Military is an example of a pretty expensive knife, right? Like, you're hard-pressed to get into any version of the Military for less than $150, $160. So I'm aware of that. But even then, you know, for that $160 for a Military, compare that to most of your ZTs, right? Compare that even, you know, and when you get up to that $160 price range, now you're just starting to compete with Benchmades. So, and I know the Grip Tillion can be had for like $75, okay? I'm not being unfair. But I think quality for price, Spyderco does a pretty good job. Do they do as good as the Kershaws and the CRKTs? No, probably not. They're a little more expensive, but I'm going to suggest you're getting a little more for those dollars as well. So, for all those reasons, for the distinctiveness of the designs, for the coolness and functionality of the designs, for all those great sprint runs and special collaborations with different designers, for the uncompromising attention to detail and quality, and for following up. You know, I've seen a lot of guys who said, you know, I got this knife, it had blade play that I couldn't get out, and I sent it back to Spyderco. Hey, that's good. You know, it sucks that you got a bad one, but it says something about the company that they're willing to stand behind their products. Finally, I do have one complaint that I really want to make, and I know I'm getting long, but I've got to say this. I hate that Spyderco puts in there not to take your knife apart, because I feel like taking your knife apart and cleaning up that pivot area is essential maintenance. It's like cleaning your gun. It just needs to be done every so often. And if I've got to send my knife back to Spyderco every time, that's a drag. I feel like us as end users should be able to take a knife apart, clean up that pivot area, get it functioning the way we want it to so that it's nice and smooth, and that should and it should not affect our warranty. So Spyderco, if you're watching this, I'm going to send someone at Spyderco a copy. That policy kind of sucks, because I feel like, you know, especially if you carry tip up, you've got that pivot in the bottom of your pocket with the dirt and the lint and the sand, and it's going to get gummed up and it's going to need to be cleaned. And I really don't want to send my knife to Spyderco every time. You know, I know there are quality control issues and you've got to kind of remove some variables from the equation. I understand that, but I do think it sucks. Anyway, back to the last point. So far we've talked about interesting, functional, quality designs. We've talked about special offers and working with designers. We've talked about quality. We've talked about price. And for all those reasons, Spyderco is a pretty good company, and one that you ought to consider if you're looking for your next folding knife, and one that I have certainly, as a knife enthusiast and a collector, felt that they're a pretty good company. And those are all the reasons that I feel that way. I look forward to whatever Spyderco's got coming for 2015, and probably you do too. And if you're looking for a knife, don't overlook Spyderco, because you're going to get a great knife for a pretty reasonable price. I know some of them are a little more, but generally speaking, if you're going to find your one everyday carry knife, it's hard to go wrong with a Spyderco. Talk to you later.